on resolution number 2018-99, the Community Development Block Grant Contract Award. And Ms. Cockcroft, we have the title read, please.
Yes, sir. Resolution number 2018-99, resolution of City Council of the City of Mount Dora, Florida, awarding, and this, not this one, is it right? Okay, right. Awarding the Community Development Block Grant. Contract to Hartman Civil Construction Co. Inc., providing for legislative binding consent, providing for authority to city manager for implementing administrative actions, providing for authority to the mayor to execute, providing for a savings provision, and providing for scriveners, errors, conflicts, severability, and effective date.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes.
Excuse me. Sorry. Yes, thank you, Mayor, council members. The Cdbg grant we talked about for the last year plus, as you're probably more than aware, we were very fortunate to receive a $750,000 grant from the state Cdbg, as well as, and it actually filters through the county in this respect. And then the Northeast CRA also contributed $50,000. So it's an $800,000 project. It is anticipated to exceed that by about $23,000. At this point in time, I'm actually not requesting council to approve a budget amendment. We will bring this project back to you as we proceed through the project. We would just like to go ahead and continue as expected. Probably around the 75% if project completion. We'll look at the value of cost spent. If we anticipate that we will spend that $23,000, I will bring the project back to you at that point in time. I will also bring to you, hopefully at that point in time, funds from the county. I will reach out to the county because they do have Cdbg funds available also for these type projects. And then if that's not available, we'll reach back out to the Northeast. But I believe that we might be able to come right under or right at the $800,000. And if not, we'll update you in the very near future. And I just feel like for this particular project, we're going to spend a lot of money out in this area working on the stormwater. I don't believe 800 is going to take care of all of our stormwater issues, and we've identified that. So to just adjust that by the 23, if we run into a deeper problem, it could be 53 or even more than that. So that's the one reason why I felt like that it might be best just to look at it at the 75% complete time period and then bring the project back to you at that point in time.
You have a motion for approval?
I move approval.
Second. Any comments, questions, Mr. Wilson? And then Ms. Millett?
Thank you. The Northeast community has been looking forward to this money and this project and this construction that they sorely need for a long time. And so it's starting to come to fruition now, and I'm really pleased with that. We got the grant, we might as well do the project. Thank you.
Ms. Millett?
Yeah, I too am pleased that we have the money and we're going to start this. Isn't there something that we're looking at a stormwater mitigation plan for this area, and how is this going to tie in with the planning document still yet, or the planning process still yet to be done?
We will have a master plan and stormwater master plan, and that we'll be bringing that to you in the very near future. But this was identified ahead of time, and this is partial. I think if Paul were here, he'd probably tell you it's about 75–80% engineering piece in the sense of stormwater. The other piece is some other little ancillary type of work. So I believe, again, it should go ahead and go forward, and it sets us up to be able to lay that plan out and tell us what other changes we might make.
Right.
We have some houses in the area that really have some severe flooding, and I'm not sure that this particular plan is going to address that at all at this point in time, but we will see.
Anybody else from council? Any questions? Anybody from the public wish to address this issue? Seeing none, Ms. Johnson, we have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Ralston?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Crail?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Ms. Tillett?
Yes.
Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. Resolution number 2018-100, budget amendment for law enforcement youth programs. Ms. Cockcroft, could we have the title read, please?
Yes, sir. Resolution number 2018-100, a resolution of City of Mount Dora, Florida, requesting a budget amendment for the Law Enforcement Trust Fund, LETF, and the Community Involvement Fund, CIF, providing for legislative findings and intent, providing for authority to the city manager for implementing administrative actions, providing for a savings provision, providing for scriveners, errors, conflicts, severability, and effective date.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes.
Yes, thank you, Council and Mayor. I will just say that on the Law Enforcement Trust Fund, before I turn it over to the Chief, there are certain funds in the state of Florida, and the Law Enforcement Trust Fund, as well as the forfeiture funds, state statute as well as federal statute does not allow us to budget those funds during the budget process. they must be brought to you at a separate time and address the items that they will administer the funds to. So that is why you do not see these funds budgeted, and why you will always see that the chief or someone from his organization will bring these budget amendments to you throughout the year. Also allows for them to look at their state or their federal, if we happen to have forfeiture funds separately, and specify those. So there are a few state statutes and federal statutes that apply to very select funds that cause us to bring these items to you during different times of the year. Chief?
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, there's also donations that we get from citizens. There's also grants that we get from Walmart or Target. And all of that's in city policy that much like the LATF fund, that I need to bring forward when we spend it. We have a lot of programs, as you know, outreach programs that we do, and it just makes it a lot easier if you give the authority to the city manager, and then I can just bring a memo to her, and I'll just say, back to school, you know, we need to purchase 60 backpacks, and we get them in groups, and there's no way logistically I could bring each one up here. So we're just asking for authorization for the city manager or her designee to go ahead and expend these funds.
Any questions from the public? Motion for approval, please.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments, questions from council? Ms. Tillett?
Yeah, just one comment. Whatever we can do to make it easier to get these funds out of sitting in somebody's piggy bank to out to the community where they can do the most good, I'm all for it. And the amount isn't so huge that it would require coming to council to begin with. So go forth and do good stuff.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Anybody from the public wish to address this item? Seeing none, Ms. Johnson, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Ms. Tillett?
Yes.
Mr. Ralston?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Crayon?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. Resolution number 2018-101, America's Gold Star Families Memorial Marker Placement in Gilbert Park. Ms. Cockcroft, could we have the title read, please?
Yes, sir. Resolution number 2018-101, a resolution of City of Mount George, Florida, to approve the placement of an American Gold Star Families Memorial Marker in Gilbert Park, providing for legislative findings and intent, providing for authority to the city manager for implementing administrative actions, providing for a savings provision, and providing for scrivener's errors, conflict severability, and effective date.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As you notice in this particular item, the memo, we did present the request to both the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board as well as the Public Art Commission. Ms. Jewell is here to present that and provide you more information, excuse me.
Actually, that was my mistake. It went to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, but it did not go to the Art Commission. Somewhere in my sleep it did. But when I had staff go back and review the minutes, we couldn't find it anywhere. So that being said, the Parks and Rec Advisory Board did listen to the request. It was originally for Donnelly Park. They had a good discussion and good feedback and suggested it be placed in Gilbert Park near Alexander Springs. Yvonne Wolf is actually here and would probably do better justice than I giving an overview of the Gold Star Memorial.
Thank you. I'm Yvonne Wolf, and I'm representing the Lakes and Hills Garden Club of Mount Dora tonight. Address for them is Post Office Box 311, Mount Dora. As Lakes and Hills Garden Club, we are members of, I'm going to give you a little overview of why we want to do this plaque. We're a member of the Florida Federation and the National Garden Club Association. The National Garden Club is the one who first initiated the Blue Star Memorial Highway program throughout the 50 states, Alaska and Hawaii, and they made the large Blue Star Memorial cast iron markers that are along all these highways. And later in time, they initiated smaller plaques, byway markers are what they're called. They're for cemeteries, city parks, and gardens. Last year, the Lakes and Hills Garden Club had the opportunity and the honor of being able to place a Blue Star Memorial marker on a rock in Chautauqua Park, which I think all of you were there, and we've talked about that wonderful experience that day. This year, and their final one they offer is called a Gold Star Families Memorial Marker. And to be able to talk to you a little bit about what they do is in World War I, after the captain had his Blue Star Memorial banner, or Blue Star banner, that could be put in the homes, windows, and out front. When one of the service group people, family members, would die in action of any kind, that Blue Star was removed and a Gold Star was put on. So that's the beginning of the Gold Star Memorials. One of the mothers who lost her son started reaching out to other family members who had lost, and she initially started the Families Organization. And their mission statement is that, first off, they are a not-for-profit organization as well. And their mission statement is that they provide honor, hope, and healing to all those grieving from any military loss. Okay? So now move forward to Lakes and Hills Garden Club. It is an honor for us to be able to, through our funds, purchase this Gold Star plaque, purchase a rock similar or some other monument type base like we did in Chautauqua Park for the Blue Star, place that in Gilbert Park, which we, by the way, I love the advisory board suggestion of that, by the creekway, by the footpath, and I've provided for you in a simulation of what that could look like. We would re-landscape around that. There are some dying bushes already, so it's nothing that we have to take out. Clean it up and re-landscape that. And that would be at our cost. From the National Garden Clubs Association, part of what we have to do is have a dedication ceremony. Due to the advisory board's suggestion, I've now been talking to the lead of the Patriots Day, which is on November 11th. We would be honored if we would be allowed to have our little portion of a dedication involved with that, which all it would include, since we parallel, we would want the same things that she is already doing, or that committee's already doing, except with the addition of having somebody speak on what the Gold Star Families Organization is. So tonight, what I'm asking for you is permission to be able to purchase that monument, get it placed in Gilbert Park, and be able to have it ready for the Patriots Day celebration this year, November 11th, 2018. Any questions?
Have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second. Okay. Any questions?
Just want to thank the Lakes and Hills Garden Club for this initiative. I think this is terrific.
Thank you. It's our honor. We work all the time to earn funds to do these things, and it's a great honor for us.
Very impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the linking this with the Patriots, I think is, and I think you probably already talked on this, I think is probably a great combination to do this at the same time, and really wonderful. So.
Yes, Roseanne Amato, 541 East First Avenue. Yvonne approached me tonight about this. Somebody mentioned this to me earlier, but it's the first time we've connected on this, and we would be totally honored to be a part of this monument. So, yeah, we can give you 10 minutes certainly to do that. And in fact, we've already stood outside and talked about the agenda, and I think what will happen, Mr. Mayor, is that after you do your welcoming remarks, we'll do that. We'll let them make their presentation, and then we'll follow that with the police department's honor guard and that flagpole presentation that they all do, and they'll make a pretty dramatic and beautiful beginning for Patriot Cruise and Salute. So yeah, we'll be thrilled to have you.
And then all we would do is guide people to go see that after their full day is finished, because it will be a little ways away from the festivities, but it's in the park. They'll easily be able to walk inside.
Yeah, it works out great, so I'm sure we can do that. And Yvonne said we make it easy, because I told her what we do at the beginning, and we do the flag presentation, we sing the national anthem, and she said, oh, you're doing everything that we want to do, so all they have to do is 10 minutes of their time. So that's great.
Any other comments from the council?
Pays to be mayor, doesn't it?
All these honorariums I did, right? That's fantastic. Anybody from the public wish to address this item? Seeing none, Ms. Johnson, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Creel?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Robson?
Yes.
Ms. Tillett?
Yes.
Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. done, that was done, that was done. We're on to resolution number 2018-101, bond financing for public parking and.
109, sir.
109.
Resolution 218-109.
109. What did I
Yes,
say?
sir. 101.
109.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and, Ms. Coughlin, we have the title there, please?
Yes, sir. Resolution number 2018-109, a resolution expressing the intent of the city of Mount Joy, Florida, to issue tax exempt debt to design, permit, and construct public parking improvements, expressing the intent for purposes of compliance with United States Treasury Regulation Section 1.150-2-E to reimburse with the proceeds of such tax exempt financing expenditures made with respect to the design, permitting, and construction of such improvements, providing for the issuance by the city of notes, bond, or other obligations in one or more series in an aggregate principal amount not exceeding $4 million to pay for the cost of such projects, and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, council members. Several items on this particular one. First, I'd like to talk about the projects a little bit identified in here. Then I'd like to have our finance director, Tom Klinker, come up and discuss what the intent of the resolution is. And then our financial advisor is here also to be able to provide some insight and some other information. So I'd just like to ask that we go through that process, Mayor, if you're okay with that.
Right.
Thank you. So this particular one is a $4 million request. That is a not to exceed dollar amount. By no means do I believe that, based on the information we have received and that we have looked at, that it would be $4 million. But if you recall last year's budget, we talked about parking garages and parking services, and we really shied away from the word garage, so we went to surface lots. You as a council instructed during the process that we at least have $1 million in that budget process to talk about parking lots or parking services. Basically from that perspective, we were instructed to go find either property or find a lot, if we could actually find a lot as it was presented to us, but to bring back solutions. If you also recall, the CRA and the Northeast CRA have also been actively involved in looking for parking to support all of our facilities, because obviously the shortage that we're feeling in the downtown is from the during the season, during the events, as well as other times when we have services at the community service or community building, excuse me. We have a concert there of 600 people, and we do not have enough parking. We struggle with parking, I should say it that way, when we have that many people here. And we do believe that we would sell out maybe some of those events that we don't sell out if we had some parking there. So the $4 million represents looking at 2 different properties, which I mentioned to you, I believe, various times, but I know that most recent was June 5th. We talked about the consideration to at least reach out to the owners of the property on 3rd and Baker, in which I would like to purchase that property. Also reach out to the post office owners, possibly as a purchase or a lease. I also brought to you that at that point in time that it's about $500,000 to build a 50 to 60 space parking lot. We looked at the layout of the land, and that was based on the configuration of car spaces and parking spaces on those properties would accommodate 50 to 60, actually up to maybe 74 even in certain setups, but also at another $200,000 if we were to put restrooms at those parking lots, because we've talked about the fact that one of the challenges we have is that we do not have enough restrooms. We have Sunset Park. That's the only public other than Donley, and a lot of folks do not realize Donley is there for available restrooms. And unless we bring in porta potties. So that's just on a regular day in the downtown during season. So obviously during events we bring in the porta potties. So we were looking at a purchase price of $750,000 to $800,000, maybe even $850,000 for the parking space as far as the land, the area. Another $500,000 added to that for the to actually put in the parking surface part of that, and then $200,000 for the restroom. So again, $700,000 for the amenities, $800,000 for the parking. It's $1.5 million times 2, so 3, give or take. I'm not sure that all those numbers actually add up in the sense that we have been negotiating. We're pretty close to that number, but you know, we haven't finished that, so I still have to bring that back to you as far as securing the first property. I do believe that possibly could be obtained by the end of the week. And that we could bring you that deal. But So the 4 million really came from those two thought processes of those parking lots, from being instructed through the budget process the last year. We've had the parking garages, we've had parking services, we've had parking studies, all of that in the CIPs going back 5 years. What I present to you here tonight is just one solution to be able to provide the parking for the downtown. Obviously, we looked at the other solutions in the sense of timed parking, which we've instituted, and we've implemented that in the downtown. We've looked at the loading zones. So I believe we've gone through the checklist, so to speak, and we've tried to check off each of those items. This was another item that was actually presented to me as one of my items I should fulfill from being hired. It was one of the things that said, you know, you need to make sure that you're looking at this in the future. So I've taken this to heart and run with it. So at this point in time, I'd like for Mr. Klinker to come up and explain to you the actual initial direction of this resolution. So.
Thank you. He's Tom Klinker, Interim Finance Director. I guess this is sort of the starter's gun to this whole process, if you will. This is not in any way tying you up with, these are not to exceed totals. There's going to be a lot of dialogue going forward in terms of what the actual projects for each one of these three items that are before you. But this is the maximum amount. You're not issuing any debt tonight. You're not agreeing to purchase any properties or do any improvements tonight. The things that are before you tonight simply allow you that if you move forward with these projects and you do finance them, you can pay some of the costs that are being incurred now out of the proceeds of the debt that you will issue at a future date. And that you're able to look back 60 days. So any costs that have been incurred, like appraisal costs or engineering costs or any of those things that you've already invested in these acquisitions, you're able to pay that out of proceeds from any debt, whether it be a loan or a bond or whatever. And I was listening to that reference to the Internal Revenue Code, and it's like to the Federal Code of Regulations, and you know, all it's really saying is we want to give ourselves the opportunity going forward that if we have costs, if you authorize the issuance of debt, and if we have incurred costs prior to the date of issuance of that debt, we're able to reimburse ourselves out of those proceeds from the debt. I think that's pretty much about what we're each one of these next three items is basically to allow you to accomplish that objective.
Jeff Larson from Larson Consulting, who is your the city financial advisor, and I think, Jeff, you've been on board with the city 5-7 years?
Something like that, yes. I was going back to my notes. Good to see Mayor and Vice Mayor and the council. Mike Williams is here too with Ackerman. He's the bond attorney who drafted everything with daughter Nicole. I was here to keep an eye on you. That's what I was told when I left the house tonight, Mayor. So the thing I would add that Mr. Klinker has mentioned is this is the exact procedure we've done when we did the CRA note, when we did the utility note, and we refunded the 2001 bonds, which are now 2011 bonds. So this is, as Mr. Klinker said, Thomas said, the first shot off the bow. It does not authorize the debt. We always start with a higher number. Robin and Tom sit with us, and Nicole, and tell us what the number is. It's always easier to go down. It's not very easy to go back up. So this is not to exceed. It also, in the resolution that Mike prepared for you, Mr. Williams prepared for you, let me just talk about the next step. The next step does include us, as we've done in the past, on this project. Given the amount, this is more appropriate to do a bank financing than a bond issue. Surface lots don't last as long as a building. The land loss lasts for a while. So we're conservative. We like the debt to be paid off as quick as it can. And so we've discussed with your staff that this is much more appropriate for a bank note, maybe a 10-year bank note along those lines. Our step would be after tonight, should you give us the authorization to proceed, we would issue a bank RFP as we've done in the past. We would get the banks to come back and tell us, based on the structure, what is the rate, and then we would bring that back to you at a future date, both the results of the bank RFP and a resolution asking for the debt to be authorized at an amount that we know what that amount is, because that gives your city manager time on her process. And we probably foresee that happening the end of August at your meeting, I think the 28th. So that's the process for this one. Should I sit down and you're going to describe the projects on the other? Are there any questions? Or?
I think go ahead and let's go through the other two because
Okay.
they're a little different, and let's at least tell the process for that, and that kind of speeds up, and then you can ask questions at the end.
Do you want a motion individually?
We're going to do the individual as we go, but he's going to explain
Okay.
it now
Collectively.
because everything's kind of hinging on this. All three of these are about the same kind of thing. So
Yes.
be better to
Yes.
do it now and then later.
I'm fine.
So the second series of projects is for capital improvement revenue bonds, and we said up to 22 million. That's based on estimates on really two projects. What has been in the CIP program for a long time is your public works building, and the city manager is much closer to that with staff. I think he had a presentation about what that might be, 11.8 million or less. And the other project is one that was discussed also with the city council. I understand it wasn't here that night, which is the building behind us here, which is potential, again, parking, and maybe the top floor for space for you folks, so this space can be used for other city staff since you're kind of hemmed in. So that is a longer life financing, and that would be something to be more like 20, 25, 30 years, more appropriate for a bond issue. And again, we've estimated a higher number than we think we need, which is 22 million, not to exceed. It gives us the ability, as Tom said, to reimburse ourselves. It also authorizes us to do two things. On a bond, we need somebody to work with us, along with Mr. Williams, to do the offering document. Your city manager has an example of one I gave her for the city of Tamarack. When you sell bonds, unlike a bank approving and buying into the portfolio, this is a document after you go through the ratings process, the bond insurance process, where individuals, retail, local people, first priority, have a chance to buy the bonds in years 1 to year 30. And that document would be prepared, and that attorney is called Disclosure Counsel. So we have bond counsel who gives us a tax-exempt opinion and drafts the resolutions. Disclosure Counsel works for you. I don't want the investment banker, which is the next step, to hire they can hire their own attorney, but I want Disclosure Counsel to disclose your situation and prepare that document on behalf of the city. That's a more conservative approach. So we're asking authorization to do an RFQ. We talked at length with the city attorney on different firms that we're going to go to that are specialists in the area on that. And we would need an investment bank or investment banks. And as you see there in the Tamarack issue, that was, I can't remember the amount, probably not too long ago, 17 million or 18 million. This is where you hire investment banking firms that demonstrate experience and expertise in this area. And to be honest with you, it also focus on issues of this size. We don't want to hire a firm that's only does $100 million, $300 million transactions, and they send us a junior person. So we're very good at reviewing those. We would do that with your staff. And this resolution authorizes us to put out that underwrite RFP, come back and make some recommendations to you at a later date. Timing for all of this is November. So working, your city manager said October to me, and I said, well, let me work out the schedule. It's really November. This is a much more exhaustive process to go through the rating agencies, the bond insurers, and hire the underwriters. So this we think would bring back to you in the middle of November for a closing, and we would have to come back to you for approval once we know the amounts, the ratings, and we have a lot more to bring to you. So there's two entities that we need to add to our team: bond counsel, financial advisor, disclosure counsel that does that document, and underwriters.
And I understand also, Jeff, so just a brief explanation of obviously having to have a credit rating, because we do not have one at this point in time.
Right. I've been your financial advisor for a number of years, and we've done just banknotes. One, you don't have a lot of debt. So the good news is the city's been a very, very good steward. We also had a long period of time where the economy was tough for everybody. Now we're seeing that turn around, and you got tremendous growth opportunities and all the exciting things in front of the city. So yes, to do that issue, we will need to talk to the three rating agencies, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch, and see where they see your rating being. AAA is the highest, and then AA and A. I think you're in the A category, which is a very high rating, mainly because you're a smaller city. You're not the city of Orlando. And they're gonna see that you don't have a lot of debt, which is great, but you don't have 150,000, citizens here. So they look at size sometimes. But you're very well run, you've got good fund balances, you've got good coverage on your other debt. We're conservative in coming up with a plan. So the rate agencies we'll talk to, and if you're A-rated, we'll also talk to the bond insurers because they're like the guarantors. So they can wrap an insurance policy around it, and they're double A-rated, and we have to, by Florida law, recommend that only if there's a benefit to that. So we will talk to 2 bond insurers and 3 rate agencies, and that takes a lot of time. And your staff will work very hard with us to go through that process. So.
And the final part of that, because we have listed the public works facility as well as the potential for a facility or garage here, at any point in time, we can present to council consideration just to look at the public works facility or just to look at the garage. There's no requirement prior to accepting anything. There's no requirement to downgrading in the sense of the dollars. This would be just the first step in looking at the fact that if we look at the big picture as presented, this would be the total amount needed. So I believe it's 11.8 for the public works facility and around 9 for the parking garage to build, et cetera, et cetera. Again, it may not need to look at both of those at that point in time, but it would include those if needed.
That's correct. We would come back to you at least twice in this process to report to you on the results of the underwriters and the disclosure council. They would need to be hired by you, and the results of the ratings and the results of the bond insurance. Once all that's there, we'll have a much better idea on the projects. And that would be a resolution authorizing those, so you're correct.
Okay. And then the fire station as the last one, the other.
Right. The fire station, I have a very thick file on because you spend a lot of time on your fire assessment program and your fire stations. This is, I'm not an expert in that area, but I was here one of those nights, and this is for fire station 34, 35, and 36, if I remember. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
And you need all 3 of them as recommended by your staff for the ISO rating. So this is a dedicated financing. We need disclosure counsel, we need underwriters. These are long life assets. So again, we'll look at 20, 25, 30 years. The difference in rates between 20, 25, and 30 years are very low right now. The yield curve is very tight, very flat. So it's not a bad time to go out a little bit longer. Because when I look at your study, you have other stuff coming. So it'd be nice to have a longer term one first, and then you can put your other stuff on it in the back end. This would take, you have an assessment resolution already scheduled with the Government Services Group. We work very closely with Sandy at GSG. We give her our debt service. She gives you the total picture. That would be secured by the fire assessments.
And of course, we've had the fire assessment fees in last year's budget, or excuse me, the fire stations in last year's budget and in this year's budget, and began the discussion of the Fitch report, which was related to all the stations in the ISO in November of this past year, and December, I think total somewhere around 8 work sessions we've discussed those. So we've also presented those and had those in the budget for, again, we've also looked at being able to reach out to the state for appropriations on that, and we'll continue to do so because I do believe that's important too, that we just don't put ourselves in one bucket and only look at one bucket being able to fund it.
And when you do an assessment financing of any type, there is a kind of a promise that's given, and Mr. Williams can define this better than I can. You approve assessments annually, but logically, if you do a 25 or 30-year assessment bond, we'll know what that rate is to cover the debt service because it's a fixed rate on the bonds, and there will be a covenant in place to levy assessments at least to cover the debt, as in any debt. So that's the typical process for assessments. Can I cover that?
Yeah, you did a very good job.
So that is going to take probably. We're gonna move close one in early November, maybe one toward the end of November before Thanksgiving. You lose bondholders and investors as you get to Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays, as you know, and we'll be working pretty hard to meet those timetables. It's a good bit of work, but we're excited for it. We've got a great financial foundation here, and that helps a lot.
Thank you.
Great. I appreciate all the information, and what we'll do now is we're going to entertain a motion for 2018. We're long one here. 2018-109, the bond financing.
I'll move 109.
Okay, can you get a second?
Second.
Okay, and what we'll do is, ask questions on 109, then we'll be doing each resolution, then we can ask additional questions on each one. So, any questions for the public parking that you need to ask of, Ms. Hayes or anybody at this point?
Just a comment, except for we have, for as long as I can remember living here, we've been complaining about parking, and it's never happened, or it's slow to be happening. And now, this is the beginning, the open door, the open window to get this happening for the residents that have been begging for this at least 5 years to get started. And so this resolution responds to, at least in my memory, 5 years of complaints about lack of parking. So I'm happy to support it.
Ms. Stewart?
Once again, I don't support this, nor do I support the next two resolutions.
Let's just go with the one, Fran.
Okay, but I guess I'll repeat myself. It's not that I don't think that we have a need. It's not the product, it's the process. We have not yet, as a body that is entrusted with coming up and approving a budget, we have not sat down, we have not developed a common set of assumptions that we are to move forward with. We have not discussed any of these projects as far as timing and an actual need. We don't have a good idea of exactly what our debt status is, because we don't have the CAFR out yet. There's just not enough information available to make me feel comfortable that that I'm doing my due diligence in representing my constituents. So I think we should delay this, not like table it with the continuance or whatever the proper words are, so that this comes back after we have at least had an initial sit down as a council to evaluate the budget and what happens when, because we're talking about a lot of money here amongst these three projects, and more money coming in subsequent years. So whereas I may very well support the projects itself, it's the process that I think we're putting the cart in front of the horse.
Anybody else? Mr. Massey?
I have sort of the same feeling. I don't mean to be negative, but I too think this is a sense of timing. I'm new to this whole process. We've not had the benefit of doing the prioritization in the CIP. We don't, at least I'm not prepared to feel that obligation that I have to my constituents. I would much have preferred to have had the CIP discussions and the budget analysis before this came before us. I'm not comfortable at where I am right now, understanding our debt analysis for the future and for the long term that these projects represent. I just think we're a little bit premature, and I'm sorry for that. And I may well double back as time goes on, and I have more of that information. I'll be a strong proponent of some of these programs. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. Mr. Tucker?
Yeah, I want to limit my comments to strictly this, this particular item. And I'm not going to talk about the other two because we haven't gotten there yet. But with this one, I will tell you that I think it needs to go forward. If this was a significantly larger amount, I'd be very, very reserved in my comments. But with this particular one, dealing with the parking and moving forward with the parking, which is a major issue in town, that every tourist, every visitor, every guest, every resident has an opinion about, I think it's here time to roll the dice and move forward with it.
Oh, excuse me, Ms. Sosa.
Go ahead.
I just want to double back.
I agree with you, and again, speaking to just this one, I absolutely agree with you.
I do, in listening to what Ms. Hayes presented, we have been talking for over 18 months that I've been back here about moving forward with things. These have been discussed in a number of different sessions, and now we've gotten the package brought to us to where we could sit here and discuss it. I agree, this one is probably one that the amount is probably higher than what it's going to need to be, but they're still refining that down. So I'm comfortable with that also, and it also provides the opportunity for everyone to begin understanding the process. I've been through this process multiple times in my past life working at a healthcare system, and this is part of the process, as was explained to us. And there is timing to it, but there's always an opportunity to decide you don't want to move forward, but you are doing the process. Because to me, it is a process. That's the difference on how I see this. But again, I've had past history with these multiple times that you take yourself through the process and you have different decision points. So I'm comfortable with this ordinance also moving forward. I'm sorry,
It's okay. Just real quick before this stuff. And I too had opportunities to be part of this kind of process in the past in my former life. And I'm sure Mr. Krill has also. And it is a process right now, and we're not being asked to do anything but to start something rolling. And everything on here that we're looking at, I know we're talking about the first one, but that one in particular we've been talking about. We've been putting money aside. We've asked her to put money in there. We've looked at shuttle parking. Now we're getting into something that's going to be a little more permanent for the citizens and for our visitors. 65 here, another possibility, because once we can secure the land, we can start moving on the projects and really having something good for the city with the lots and having some parking, some additional parking. We do have the off-street parking. We rely on other venues like the First National Presbyterian, or excuse me, First Nationalist, the Methodist Church, Presbyterian Church, other places like that. They're relying on their kindness to allow us to do in the things. They're not offering that land for sale to us. We just have to help maintain it. But now we have an opportunity to do something, and how it ties in the future for the city. And we're probably going to be long gone off this council. But I think what we start doing today, and it's like with the streetscaping. When I first came on council, and back in 2012, this council was still talking about streetscaping for quite a few years. We started that movement there. That movement started, and to start at least getting how can we fund it? Okay, once we found out, hey, we can't fund it, we can't do it, and we went on. So we got different portions of our streetscaping done. We still need to do some more on that. Granted, it's I guess it's the time in the city's life that yes, things that we talk about, things that we wish for, they do cost money, and there's no way around that. Things cost money, and we can't have that someplace special. We can't have the different things that we do in the city without expending the funds for it. And I think what we're just asking for right now, not asking for any expenditures, just asking for to start the process, so decisions, so we can make what you were talking about, Ms. Still, some informed decisions down the road. We're not at that stage to get that. When we get all the financial information, then we can start making those more informed decisions. And we have talked about all these projects. Some that we have not talked about, we have talked about these projects, and we talk about them a lot. The fire stations about doing things in City Hall, and the parking that we need to do there, parking garages. We talked about the different parking projects that we need to do. So yes, the City Council has talked about it, and it's all been part of our goals and our strategic planning. Economic development, I think it is number one, and infrastructure number two. This falls right in line with our number two goals of infrastructure that we need for the city. Right now, Ms. Phil, you have some other comment you want to make?
Yeah. Okay. Just want everyone to realize, if you remember, I am a huge proponent of surface parking lots. I mean, I fought against high-rise garages, whatever, in the downtown area. It's not the fact that that I don't want us to move forward with parking. It is that we don't have a budget. We haven't even sat down as a body to go through the various CIP projects. This is sort of like saying, okay, well, let's just move ahead on something and we'll pull back later if we don't want it. It says in the resolution here, it is necessary, desirable, convenient, and in the interest of the city that the project be designed, permitted, constructed, and financed as contemplated in this resolution. I don't see how we can say that when we haven't had any even initial budget discussions and come to any sort of, like I said, a common set of assumptions on what things we want to do and what things, we don't want to do. It's just come back to us with this, the meeting at the end of this month. It's just, we're doing this backwards and I can't, in all good faith, vote. I can't vote for this as it is today. I'm just saying, this is my piece. I just have a problem with even doing this much right now. And the end of the month, perfect. Come on back.
Mr. Creel and then Mr. Wilson.
I support this because I know that this is allows us to move ahead with the process and get concerns that we all have, I think, that are similar to Ms. Tillett, what Ms. Tillett has voiced. So I support it. I have a question about the title, Bond Financing for Public Parking Improvements. Should we, if we're really not looking at this as a bond project, but as a bank note, bank loan, are we okay with that title, or should we just call it Financing for Public Parking Improvements? And maybe now isn't.
This is the time to ask it.
For the record, Mike Williams, Orange Avenue, Orlando is where my office is. The title talks about taxes and debt, and if you look at the second whereas clause, it says revenue bonds, notes, or other obligations. So it's not intended to be a bond issue. I mean, you certainly have a lot of flexibility in what type of debt you issue for this purpose. In fact, that's true of the other two resolutions, which even though I think that the contemplation is those will be bond issues, it's the same language there. So if you all decide you want to do a bank loan in that regard, you have the flexibility. And this resolution is, as the mayor and other folks have said, it's very preliminary. It really doesn't tie you into anything. Legally, it doesn't tie you into anything. It's as Tom said and other folks have said, it gives you the opportunity to reimburse yourself from taxes and proceeds if you do go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Olson, then I want to.
Thank you. I was interested in the very interesting comments from Councilman Massey, because I felt that way too when I was a new council member and we were doing the streetscapes, and I was, I don't know anything about this. I've read about it and I've studied it, but I don't know what the rest of the council members do because I'm brand new. If that's the case, and while that's a very, very valid concern, because it was for me back then as well, we have new council changing every year. And if that's the case, we would never accomplish bond financing or any kind of financing because it would be brand new to the council and to some council members. So while I fully understand it and have felt that as well, I'm prepared to go forward with it. It's part of our strategic plan. It's part of our envisioning program that we started in 2011 or before that. Back in 2011, I believe it was. We have headed in our CIP studies for how many years? A number of years anyway. We tried to dedicate that. So, and some of us have been there during those period of times, throughout those times. It seems to me we can always delay it, and I'm really worried about what the message will be to the public if we say, well, let's wait one more year or one more month or whatever. is before us now. I think our staff and our experts that are dealing with this have looked at it, and I'm ready to have movement started, and this is the way we start the movement. We're not committing to anything. We're moving forward, saying let's go forward with this. And, so that's my reasoning for supporting it.
Okay. My comments are, at this point is the, and you're right, Mr. Tiller, for one thing there about that. Yes, it's going to. We don't have a lot of the information now. To get the information we need to get, we have to expend money. Okay, to do that, either through engineering, architects, you name it. We're going to have to find out what some of the costs are, and we're going to make decisions on exactly what we want to do as a council. By passing these resolutions and having the ability to reimburse ourselves, it allows us to, from the time we approve these resolutions, to start keeping tabs of the expenditures that we do, as internally within our finance department, our engineering department, other organizations, the different expertise we have out here in the audience, and all it's going to be expenses that we're going to have. We can keep track of those expenses, and if we keep going forward with this thing and we get the funding for this, then we can turn around and use that funding to reimburse ourselves. Without that, we're just going to be spending money, because we're still going to be looking at garages, we're still going to be looking at the public works board, we're still going to be doing everything we're doing, and we're going to have to make a decision somewhere down the road on this. And I think we just kid ourselves to think that we're not going to have to do a garage or do surface parking or do a public works building. We know that we don't have one right now, and we need to get one. And we don't. And if we think that we're not going to need fire stations, when we know we got one that is getting ready to fall down around our ears right now, and we're doing a disservice to a whole group of firemen for not having a proper facility for them. And so there's timing. We're right on track, I think, with the timing. We're not putting the cart before the horse, and I think we're doing it in the proper sequence that's being planned out by the city manager and some very expert people in our audience right now. So I have absolutely no problem in doing what we need to do at this stage of the game. And then down the road, if other information comes our way that we need to put a stop to something, we do it at that point. But right now, there's no need to do anything but to move this thing forward so we can find out and get the proper information to make the good decisions that we have to make in the future. Mr. Olson, do you have some other comments?
Nope, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
And I know where you're going with this, so anyway,
I just, first you approve a budget, then you start incurring the costs, which are, and first you approve a budget, or first you at least have some budget discussions, and I support it, but it's just, why would you expend money until you have decided amongst yourselves that this is something that you want to do, and you want to do it this year? And
okay.
Yes, we need to do it. I
think
parking's
again, Ms. Phil, we're not expending any money right now. We're not expending money right now. And to come up with a budget number, we're going to have to get some information as to the proper budget number while we're going through this whole process yet. So that'll be coming up. Well, all this is about, to get these numbers. So, but anyway, anybody from the public wish to make comments on this issue? Come forward, name and address, please.
Rosanna Botto, 541 East First Avenue. Please pass this resolution. There is no pressing issue in the city of Mount Dora more than this parking situation is, and we all know that. I've been here for 11 years. This parking situation has been discussed for 11 years, way back before that. If Ms. Hayes doesn't accomplish anything else for this city except resolve this freaking parking issue, give her a bonus and a bottle of champagne, because this is completely ridiculous. And the limited parking situation we have down here now is exacerbating some situations, because people come in, they don't have a place to park, they can't park long enough. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but my hairdresser, who used to be in the city of Mount Dora, lost a bunch of clients because they can't park long enough, I guess, to get their hair cut, I don't know, so he moved to Tavares. So now I'm going to Tavares to get my hair cut, which I'm perfectly willing to do because I can pull in right in front of his shop and don't have to look for a parking spot. So you're all, those of you who are saying we're not spending money now, you're not. You're just taking a step forward in trying to resolve this horrible problem that Mount Dora has. We've got people starting to pour in here from the 429 and the 453. So more people can get here. We got the Innovation District that's going to bring us more people into Mount Dora. And we can't wait any longer to solve this parking problem. So I hope you pass this resolution and let's get moving on it. It is long overdue. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to address? Mr. Masterson.
Evening. Mike Anderson, 7887 Crosslands Way. I'm going to ask some questions and seek some reassurance that somebody with some finance background in this city administration or whatever.
I would appreciate if you would make comments and I'm not going to debate on
I'm not trying to debate.
Okay.
I want to ask you a question. I have a master's in marketing and finance, and one of the things I learned about was the yield curve. And I'm reading regularly in the newspaper about how we're about to go, the yield curve is about to go negative. When the yield curve goes negative, it's a precursor to a recession, or at least a pretty strong indicator. And if we're going to go have a recession, do we have guaranteed assured cash flows that are going to assure that we can pay this bill? I moved here in 2007, and I've heard about Chief O'Grady having to lay off a whole boatload of people during that period of time because we ran out of money. I think we got a pretty good chance that we're going to have to do that because we're in a trade war with China, and China buys all our debt. And if we cheese off China, they're going to stop buying our debt, and then where are we going to get our money? We cheesed off Europe, they're not going to buy our money, buy our debt. So I have concerns about, I was trained in business finance, so I don't know about municipal finance as to whether you can do something different than what a business would do, because a business would retrench. So can someone assure me that your taxing authority, which is different from what a business has, your taxing authority will give you the assurances that you can pay off these loans that you're anticipating create. Can somebody help me with that, please?
You can.
You understand my question?
Jeff, will you step up and answer that question, please? And Tom,
Yes, I also have a degree in finance and marketing, been in both corporate finance and public finance. The good news about this is that we're your financial fiduciary, Mike's your legal fiduciary, so we don't want you to do something you can't do. Okay, so having done a number of financings for the city, the first thing we do is make sure you have the ability to repay the debt. But we're not the only ones who look at that. Guess what? There's banks that look at that, there's bondholders that look at that, there are rating agencies that look at that, the bond insurers will look at that. So this is a financing for the first project, up to $4 million, which I agree is going to be less than $4 million, from what I understand, is going to have a pledge of non-ad valorem revenues. Okay, legally available non-ad valorem revenues. And there are sufficient non-ad valorem revenues to cover this debt. What we're hoping to do on the $4 million is structured as a note that can be prepaid anytime without penalty, because I think as your city grows, it'd be nice to get this debt at a very low rate. We're at historical lows with rates. We actually like bad news because that means lower rates for municipal borrowers. So we're not exactly in the cycle as you are commenting on, but all these will be vetted very thoroughly. This CBNA note, the $4 million, and the project bonds for the Public Works project and the parking City Hall annex are going to come from the same revenues. That garage in the back and the Public Works are going to be shared by other departments too. So there will be other areas of the city that are contributing to the debt service. We just started developing that with your city manager and your finance director. The fire assessment bonds have a lien on fire assessments that have been vetted pretty thoroughly here with specialists in that area. that is a great source of revenue because it goes on your tax roll under the uniform method. So if a fire assessment is placed within each tax bill, it's an all or nothing payment. And that's a very, very strong source of financing. So these aren't pie in the sky projects. I watch the markets as you do. I don't have a real concern about what's going on. Bad news actually helps us because there's a flight to quality. People buy U.S. Treasuries, which brings down rates in the municipal market. So I'm not seeing anything out there that concerns me. And I think we had a transaction we closed last week for City of Tamarack, very similar process. We achieved very, very aggressive rates that went out 30 years. And there was a good appetite from investors for that. So it's a great time to issue debt, but we want to issue the right amount of debt. And we have a lot of vetting to do, including bringing things back to you. So you're not approving the debt amount, you're approving the process to let me go forward so I can get you more information. I think Mr. Rolson mentioned that. So hope that, did that address your concern? Everything, there will be full tables developed. Here's the revenues that are going to pay back the debt. Here's the debt. Here's how we can pay back the debt. That all is part of this process that we're going to go through.
I don't doubt that. And I'm glad to see, is a finance person in these questions, because when we did the streetscape, we used cash as opposed to running long-term debt. The principle is you match the revenue stream to the duration of the debt. We use short-term money for long-term expenses, and that was wrong. So I'm hoping that we've got a smarter user of cash present this time, and we don't make the same mistake again.
Well, you just hit on a point that's
We
important.
agree with you.
The surface lot is the reason I want to do a shorter term transaction.
And maybe that's long term. And on the long term.
Hold on now. Okay,
Mr. Wilson.
Okay, Mayor. One second before, we're not going to go, again, we're not going to go into discussions. Mr. Masterson, you made your comments, you asked a question, and we're going to leave it at that. So you can sit there, you can stand there, or if you like, that's fine.
And forgive me if I want to respond to his question directly, but when you were talking before about the two local accountants and that they were members of the American Institute of CPAs and the Florida Institute of CPAs, well, I'm members of those groups myself as a CPA for the last 38 years, and I issued my first municipal debt 35 years ago, 36 years ago. So, and I don't have as much experience as these people do, but I figured I've probably issued somewhere around $1 billion in tax-exempt debt during my career. So I feel like I have a good bit of experience in this regard. But as I said before, this is a first step. This is to protect you, the council for the city of Mount Dora, that you're able to recover these costs. It doesn't mean that we've defined what all those costs are going to be yet. And it doesn't mean that we've defined how it is we're going to finance those costs. This is just a first step to allow you to begin that process. On the other hand, it does set a cap, a maximum that you're going to be able to spend for each one of these projects that are supported by different revenue streams. But at this point, this is simply a preliminary step to allow you the convenience that if you choose to finance any costs that occur actually beginning 60 days ago, you're able to recover those costs from the finances.
Thank you. You brought up a good point, the 60 days backwards. I forgot about that. So it's not from this point forward, 60 days backwards, which is nice. Okay, any other comments from council? Mr. Massey?
I'd like to make another comment. I don't want you to think that I did not prepare myself for this. Since Wednesday of last week, I read an 850-page CIP. I have read the budget and in fact found an error in the budget process on the summary page that was significant. And I prepared for this hearing tonight. I still have a problem with the timing. I may be supportive of each, any, and all of these things, but I don't feel comfortable with that yet. I have an obligation representing the residents of the city in terms of helping determine priorities in the budget. I have not yet felt that comfort level from what we've done. I may when this week is out. We have a full day on Thursday. I just think this is a little bit premature. We're looking at, if I figure it right, $48 million in indebtedness right now, And I have no idea how that debt analysis is going to play out over our budget. And I'd like the comfort level to consider it.
And another, come on forward. Name and address, please.
Hi, thanks. Peter Caravat, 220 Baker Street. My wife and I are 20-plus year lovers of Mount Dora. We've been coming here many times. And we finally bought in 2011. We became aware of the parking issues and how the city was trying to address them way back when. And since that time, I saw all the properties around me go up for sale. And the city never took the leap to buy them when they were pretty affordable. In 2011, we bought a retirement home right there on Baker, 220 Baker. That's where we're going to retire next year. And suddenly, I find out the other day that the city wants to put a parking lot right next to my house. There's already a parking lot right next to it. I was just out there today and saw at 12 noon it was empty. 3 o'clock it was empty. Before I went to the meeting, it was empty. I went to the upper parking lot across the street. It was empty. I've been to all the festivals, and I know that during that time it's like impossible to park. I thought the shuttle idea was actually a pretty good idea. Not pretty well enforced or done, but I think that probably would be a very good idea. I think we look into that a little bit better. We bought that house, and then we bought all the surrounding houses on that block. This parking lot will completely impact us and our families that are there. I've spent half of my life savings over there fixing up these houses, taking pride in what someplace special represented, and living up to that same code. If you saw all the houses that I bought, when I bought them, and the shape that they were in, and if you look at them now, you say, that's the spirit of Mount Dora. You're doing this. You're benefiting the whole downtown. This is what it's all about, maintaining that look, that vintage look, sticking with whatever the city said to me, please put these windows in like this, please put this metal roof in like this. I did it all. So for that amount of money in that time, we just did it with love and devotion. Then to have that land over there that was for sale for pennies on the dollar, that another neighbor would bought up, and have them sit on it and never fix it up, it was discouraging. And one of those homes is a historic home right there in the corner. And we've talked to him and encouraged him, we saw him go in there and gut it all out initially and looked like he was going to make some progress on it. When he found out he couldn't make the McMansion that he wanted to do and level off all the land for his home because it was historic, then I think everything kind of fell apart for him. So regardless of all that, my issue is that I feel like you're going to be rewarding bad behavior by letting someone who's never fixed up his properties and add it to the city, as opposed to good behavior because it's going to be penalized. You put a parking lot there, we're going to be completely, our property value is going to be completely destroyed. There's no way to recover from that. No one wants to live next to a parking lot. Late night visitors coming in there, honking the horns, putting a restroom right next to it. People know the type of things that go on in restrooms at night. It's kind of weird. Drugs, all kinds of things happen. So we're mostly interested in contributing to the city, maintaining the vintage look of it, not allowing term people to come in here and strip away a layer of Mount Dora that makes it so special. That's a historic area there. We couldn't do anything to our houses without going through the historic board for everything. Now let's rezone it and get rid of that historic home. And I don't think that's fair that we play by the rules and the city doesn't even play by its own rules and doesn't respect that there's history right there. It may not be as old as some barn or something like that, but it is old and it meets those requirements. So I would just like to see that you guys take caution on what you think is an expedient thing to hurry up and have a little half-acre thing and throw a parking lot there when we may not even really need it. We need it on festival days, no doubt. We need it on some weekend days, no doubt. But not weekdays. The city is pretty much empty, during those times where those parking lots are pretty much empty. Do you have any questions of me?
Thank you.
Thank you much for your comments. Anybody else in the public wish to address? Name and address?
Chrissy Style, 1850 Hilltop Drive. I just have, this isn't a pro or con parking. I send you enough pictures of parking, I think. I have a timeline question. So is this, these surface lots sort of a temporary fix until we decide on a parking garage? Or is this going to be in addition to a parking garage so that we, as an eternal optimist, maybe have ever too much parking in Mount Dora? Just a question.
In addition to.
Okay.
So the surface parking lots would remain, and then if we're in the future able to go forth and build a garage or some facility, then that would be.
They would always remain parking
Yes, ma'am.
lots?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else in the public wish to address this item? Back to the count. Name and address, please.
My name is Dr. Christine King Harris. My address is 402 Jackson Avenue, 803 Florida Avenue, which is the King Center, 1405 Hackett Street, which is properties in the East Town Community District. And my concern is with creating another debt service when we have redevelopment and it is a tax increment encumbering process already. We have cautioned before regarding getting in debt and knowing that we have redevelopment as a tax increment. The State Department does not look favorably at that. This is an entitlement community, and they expect that the officials will seek the maximum use of the tax increment because it gives you back your tax. It doesn't encumber it with the debt. So that is my statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else in the public? Seeing anybody else from the council, any more comments, questions from the council? Ms. Johnson, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Ralston?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Crail?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
No.
Ms. Tillett?
No.
Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. I just wanted to just clarify, thank you for the vote on that. I want to clarify a comment that was made earlier about the about use of the cash in the past, and it's one of those things that it was necessary at the time, okay, and it was not a foolish thing to do at the time, but it did, it needed to be done for the streetscaping, and there was the money available. We were. Some of our fund balances were extremely high at the time. In the way that we could utilize, that we can utilize, cash at the time. But the cash situation is not the same today as it was. And to do this kind of amount of financing, you're not going to go to a cash level to do this kind of financing. So, but we do use cash when we need to, and when we do, we borrow from our different departments and pay back to other departments in internal financing, so to speak. So it does work good, and but I don't want to see, hear about the criticism of using the cash in the past and the way it was done. It was something that needed to be done at the time, and we'll leave it at that. And I appreciate the councils in the past for doing what they had to do to get some of the projects done that need to be done in this city in whatever fashion, and it did not hurt us financially at all in what happened. So let's take the next item, and which is basically, so we're just going to be, we've heard a lot between in the discussion on after that also. But right now, resolution number 2018-110, the bond financing for public works building, parking garage, and city hall renovations. Ms. Cockcroft, could we have the title read, please?
Yes, sir. Resolution number 2018-110, a resolution expressing the intent of the city of Mount Dora, Florida, to issue tax-exempt debt to acquire, design, permit, and construct a public works building, a parking garage, city hall renovations, and related capital expenditures expressing the intent for purposes of compliance with the United States Treasury Regulation Section 1.150-2(e) to reimburse with the proceeds of such tax-exempt financing City of notes, bond, or other obligations in one or more series in an aggregate principal amount not exceeding $22 million to pay the cost of such project and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Ms. Hayes.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'd like to just speak for just a quick moment, and I'll keep it pretty short. The Public Works facility, when I started in 2016 in the budget, was $3.1 million. That was what existed. It was one of the items that I recall watching on the YouTube, I believe at the point in time, a lot of discussion brought before the council at that point in time about the facility that needed to be built. I believe there was probably a lot of discussion because of the condition, and that some of the council members, onboarding council members, actually had gone out and interviewed or visited the site and realized the deterioration. So I know that we had some discussions at that time. We also discussed on February 9th of 2017 in depth, several hours, 4 hours of recreation and a public works facility. Staff, we brought to you the wrong type of building. We brought to you a round building. We discussed what not to do and what to do in the future. Spent several hours going through the detail of that. So we were asked to go back and look at it. So we went back and we did that. We went back and reviewed it. We went back to Gary Cranston of Bentley and asked them to redesign it. Of course, John Peters was also at hand, serving some of that capacity as an architect also. We went back and forth in the process of deciding to whom we would move into that building in the future. Then we brought back on the May 17th meeting, 2018. Gary came in here and he introduced a very shocking number for all of us. I believe the 11.8 million was a shock as to what that facility would look like. We provided drawings of that facility, but more importantly, we provided some very detailed information on the engineering piece of that, what it would take to build that facility. Talked about the skin of the facility. We talked about several items, a part of that. My understanding at that point in time, again, not having the information until we received that information in May, is that, okay, here's our building, this is going forward, where we're going with the CIP. We have continued to include that project in the budget each year in the CIP process, and we've updated the cost each year. I believe last year, if you were to look at that budget, it seems like we put in there somewhere around 7 million. I don't remember the exact number, but we put 7 million up from the 3.1 back in the prior years. So I do feel like we've spent a lot of time on that project. We talked to you earlier last year about moving our staff out to a temporary building. We were trying to put that into play also out in the triangle section. In the meantime, we've found that did not work out. We have found location on Roby in a warehouse, and we're trying to move forward with that so that we can move all of our inventory as well as move our staff to different locations, because we are going to leave our staff homeless. I mean, we truly will. Some of them will be in trailers, and some of them will be stuffed in other locations because we do not have a location for them once we tear down that building. So I have a lot of passion for this project, and the fact that I see staff awaiting to decide on what we are going to do and to do something. The building is falling apart. So we have transformers sitting out in the weather. We have other material that's sitting out in the weather on top of trucks that we spend $75,000 or more on, setting out in the weather. So even if we decide at some point in time to delay the garage or the facility of City Hall, at the back of City Hall, and modifying City Hall, please consider the Public Works facility, because our employees deserve that much, as well as our citizens, in the fact of maintaining our equipment. We've talked about that for 2 years during the budget process, and I just would implore you to think about that as you go forward. If nothing else, for those items. And I understand that has not been brought back up through the process. We did talk about it at the enterprise funds the other day when we had budget. We discussed it. There was no lengthy discussion. It was not introduced. So beyond that, I feel like that we as staff have presented you that information on the Public Works facility, and we can support that. So I put that to you. Thank you.
Have a motion for approval.
I'll move.
Have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, any comments from council on this item? And Mr. Olson?
Thank you. With regard to this, I'm assuming everyone on this council, most of us have seen the current Public Works building, have been in the building. And I've said this at, I think last year when we discussed this last year when we saw, remember the 3 possible locations, designs that we talked about. And this is this at least the 3rd year that we've talked about the need to build a Public Works building. When I toured that Public Works building maybe 2 years ago with Mr. Peters, you could, when you walked in, you could smell the mold as soon as you walked in the door. Now, is that any way we take care of our stuff or our staff? It's not, and we should. I'm assuming we all know that. If Mr. Peters mentioned this, but he mentioned it gently, and I'll be a little more blunt. If we had the state or other health department inspecting that building now, they would close us down. We would be shut down today because it's a dangerous facility for our staff. So, in terms of, I was always impressed with Mr. Crail's comments, 3 years ago, we got to take care of our stuff. That fits into that mold to me, and it's always urgent that we consider the money. It's #1 priority, but we also have to consider the staff that we direct to be in that building and to use that building, and we have to spend the time and the money and the effort to make sure that our staff that serve us and serve our citizens are adequately cared for and remain as healthy as we can. I don't see that as, I see this as even more urgent than the parking issue, in my view. That's how I look at it. When I was in there and saw that a year or 2 ago and saw what these, our employees have to, they can't use the showers in there. They're closed. At least they were when I toured it, because they were so ratty. Vermin were chewing at the walls of the building. And this is the city of Mount Dora, someplace special. I just have a real problem with not moving forward with this, with all of these, but in particular with the Public Works building. So I think it's a valuable thing, a wise expenditure of taxpayer dollars, maybe before we become a defendant in a lawsuit for some reason. I don't know if that's in the works or not, but we need to do something. Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Dillon?
I agree 110% with everything that Mr. Wolfson said. This has always been one of our top priorities. I just want us to pass the budget first. That's it. So that we see the entire picture. That's all.
Mr. Crown?
I agree. I agree with both of my colleagues that this is a critical need, and I suspect, and everybody has made excellent points, but I suspect that those who are opposed, as Ms. Tillett said, to the budget for one of these items are probably going to be opposed for the next 2 as well. And I'm much less passionate, I'll use Ms. Hayes' word, about the parking garage and City Hall renovations. That's pretty far down my list. But to move ahead, and for the reasons that our financial advisor and others, professionals have said, I'm going to support the resolution at this point, but I probably would not support the other half, but the Public Works building is important and needs our attention right now. Thank you.
Mr. Massey?
A question. Nobody has indicated and I ask if that information is available for an educated guess. The cost of the bond financing that we're looking at right now, the cost that you would expect to be reimbursed from the loan proceeds that you've talked about. What are we looking at in terms of a cost now to the city to make this move forward?
This is again Jeff Larson. The way we build a model is on any project is we get an estimate of the project costs, and so we start with the Public Works building, and I have that down for 11.8 million. We have the project fund for the parking City Hall, and I was given a number and I increased it because I don't know enough about that project. I'm not an engineer, but tearing down a building and building a parking garage and attaching, I'm not an engineer. So I had that down for 9 million. And then the other costs are very conservative costs for the bond insurance, for the rating agencies, for the lawyers to do the process. So we use estimated numbers. We take the debt rates that are today and we add 50 basis points, 0.5% to that, because we think the Fed's going to raise rates in September. So we anticipate that. So we're pretty good on estimating costs for the cost of the financing. The cost of the projects, we have to lean on your due diligence. You've gone a lot through the Public Works. I just want to, one thing here that gives you some comfort on the process, because I know the process, I think you're absolutely right to consider the process. We would come back to you in August and just ask you to confirm Disclosure Council and underwriters. They're on a contingency basis. They don't get paid unless the thing gets financed. We wouldn't come back to you and ask for a resolution of debt until middle of October. That's well after your budget process. Your CAFR is going to come out end of July. So the good news, bad news is it takes a lot more time, a lot more effort within our group, within the attorneys, within Tom, all your staff on these projects. And there's 2 projects. So again, we're asking you to consider both. But as your city manager said, you can come back and say, I like this one, I don't like that one. That's really part of your effort. But the process that we would entertain is asking people to consider both, but you're the ones who approve what those projects are. I don't know if you want to add anything on the parking garage. I assume 9 because I get conservative on something like that.
Right, and we're still working with the owners as to the appraised value or to the cost of the facility. We figured the cost of the parking space as well as the restroom and some renovations. So we were looking at about 7.5, but the 9 was, I think, that was a conservative, but a little high end in case there was more costs involved. But we've just received the appraisals back, or they've just been turned in when we've reappraised that, so we haven't received this back.
Can I answer your question on Mr. Manson?
I was driving toward a bond financing package in terms of dollars and cents for the preparation work that you will do. Okay. Is there a way to estimate what that cost would be?
I'm in a large part at risk on this as well. You know, I am paid a slight retainer by the city under my agreement, but we are working in good faith to move you down the process. And my agreement sets forth how I'm paid based on the type of debt and the size of debt. So I'm really blind to that because I want to do what's right for the city.
Okay, thanks for trying.
Yeah, and the same thing with the attorneys. We would get their fee estimates from everybody. So.
Okay, I have a question. Is this a correct statement? If we pass this tonight for moving forward with the process, because that's where I'm, and I understand Ms. Till and I disagree in looking at how the process goes, and I'm comfortable with that. But as we're moving this process forward for the 22 million, if as we do our budgeting process, and in the next several weeks, as we look at it and prioritize some of the others, we may well decide that the parking and the city hall is not one we want to move forward. We then could say to you, all we want in this one is the 11 million, so everything you run your numbers on is based on the 11 million.
You're exactly correct.
Okay.
You're going to know that well before, but and the investment bankers that respond to the RFP and the attorneys that respond to the RFP know in a timetable that the debt is coming back to you for formal approval in October, because we will give them a typical timetable. So well before that, we're looking for input from you and staff. You could say, I don't like this project, but I've got this 3 million something that's the highest ranked thing that you agree to as a council. That's not our process. We take direction from staff in terms of what you rank as your projects. I've seen public works for a long time, so I have a sense that that's a high priority. But
okay, and my second question then is, one of the things we talked about is right now we don't have a bond rating, so we
Right.
have to do that process. And by moving forward with these, it will also then signal us to move forward with that process. So whether we do it or not, because we haven't had the need or we weren't in a position to get a bond rating, we would at least be moving forward with that too for the future. So
Right.
that would be then in process, maybe even completed, even if we decided not to do some of these things, so then we are rated.
correct. We would proceed. There's the bank financing. Let's park that aside.
Right.
But in terms of the up to 22 million, which has 2 projects, and the up to 22, which is the third one, has 3 fire stations. They're looked at separately because the revenues are different. The obligor of the city's the same, but they're going to look at the capital improvement revenue bonds, the non-ad valorem revenues, as a separate rating. Your ability to pay that, service that debt. They're going to look independently at the fire assessment, and we'd have to get a rating on both. You're absolutely right, Vice Mayor.
And the follow-up to that, and any cost to go to the rating agencies and any other costs that we have within that 60-day period is reimbursed to the city based
right.
on the sale of the bonds.
Right. And at some point in good faith, should we move beyond a point where you're really picking underwriters, you're familiar with your costs, you tell us the project, then the professionals really in good faith are now the trainers moving pretty quickly. But that is all going to happen more in the middle of September with the rating agencies. But they will invoice us once we ask them to rate you. I can't tell them to go away. Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible to obtain our bond rating or our credit score without passing these resolutions?
It is. It's just not the typical process. It's just, we seek a reimbursement resolution for your protection, but it's also a signal for us that you want us to proceed with the process. The projects you might define differently, right, as we've discussed with this one, okay? You could decide in the bank note, I want this service lot, not that. That's up to you, okay? But in order to do the financings, is this the first step? This is the step that the market looks like, that you've agreed to at least do this. You authorize us to do the RFPs. I don't want to put your name out there with underwriters or with lawyers if you don't want to proceed with a project. They're all spending time, we're spending a lot of time on a project or potential financings for you. You could decide in October, I don't want to do anything. That's highly unusual at that point because you've gone through a number of steps, like you mentioned, the budget and everything else.
Yeah, okay, I was going to say that's what worries me. It's just okay.
Any other comments from council? Anybody from the public wish to address this item? Seeing none, Ms. Johnson, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Robson?
Yes.
Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Ms. Tillett?
No.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Creel?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
No.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. Okay, thank you. And last item in this thing is resolution number 2018-111, bond financing for the fire stations using fire assessment fees. And Ms. Cockcroft, could we have the title read, please?
Yes, sir. Resolution number 2018-111, a resolution expressing the intent of the City of Mount Dora, Florida to issue tax-exempt debt to acquire, design, permit, and construct fire stations and related capital expenditures, expressing the intent for purposes of compliance with United States Treasury Regulation Section 1.150-2, Trans 2, Trans E, to reimburse for the proceeds of such tax-exempt financing expenditures made with respect to the design, permitting, and construction of such improvements, providing for the issuance by the city of notes, bonds, or other obligations in one or more series in an aggregate principal amount not exceeding $22 million to pay the cost of such projects, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Ms. Hayes?
Yes, Council. I think at this point, the 22 obviously looks at the 3 fire stations. We've talked about them for the last couple of years. as part of the presentation through the fire assessment fee, and meeting our ISO rating. We have suggested the 3 fire stations. At any point in time, as with the fire assessment fee, you have the opportunity through the votes in September to make adjustments, whether or not you will look at those fire assessment fees for all 3 stations, 1 station, 2 stations, understanding that that changes your ISO if you do so, but you have that information available to you, as well as the SAFER grant information in reference to filling the station with those employees that would open the station. At this type of presentation tonight shows that we are looking to GSG to provided some of the information to Larson Consulting to look at the 3 stations, and we provided the total for those 3 stations to be built and to be considered at a 20-year, 25-year, or 30-year according to the council's direction in the next several weeks. And again, we just put this to you for discussion.
Thank you. Can I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments from council? Good. Anybody from the public wish to
talk about it? No, Jim.
Anybody else from the public wish to address this issue on the fire stations? Name and address, please.
My name is Dr. Christine King Harris, and my address, as previously stated, 402 Jackson Avenue, 803 Grant Avenue, 803 Florida Avenue, and 1405 Hackett Street, which is the Easttown grouping area. The SAFER grant is a grant that we pursued when we learned that there had been damage to the auxiliary number 1 fire station in the Northeast communities. And it also provided for mitigation. There were to be measures taken in an effort to try and give places for the firefighters and the rescue equipment, the personnel, as well as the operations. So this SAFER grant is one of those things that I have worked on personally, along with those who do FEMA and the county staff. And that was the primary purpose. Public Works and this fire station could go hand in hand. And it could be the answer to the question, because the grant is exceeding. It's large enough to do what we need to do. If we will rate the Public Works area as also equivalent for the fire department, to put the auxiliary 1 somewhere on that property also, or close around. It was on Pine Avenue between Donnelly Street and Tremaine. That's where it was located. And that building was demolished. So this is what the main purpose is. All right.
Comments?
Thank you.
Anybody else from the public wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, Ms. Johnson, can we have roll call vote, please?
Mr. Crayon?
Yes.
Mr. Robson?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
No.
Ms. Tillett?
No.
Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. Yeah. That completes all of our resolutions, correct? Okay, good. Ordinances, and we have a first reading of ordinance number 2018-08, the final PUD water for Waterman Village, and Ms. Cockcroft, could we have the title of that, please?
Yes, sir. First reading of ordinance number 2018-08, an ordinance of the City of Mount Dora, Florida, approving a final development plan, final flood master plan entitled Waterman Village, reassigning a new planned unit development PUD zoning classification to property located south of US 441, Highway 441, and east side of Donnelly Street, providing for legislative findings, providing for implementing administrative actions, conflict severability, and setting an effective date.
Thank you very much. City Manager, will please give Ms. Hayes some background on that, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, council members. Adam, I think you can come up and give us a quick summary. So obviously we brought this project to you. in a different capacity over the last several weeks, so we're excited about this, but you can give us a quick little overview of it.
Yes, ma'am. Adam Sumner, Planning and Zoning Department, doing my best in Sandersville this evening. So this is the final planning and development for Waterman Village Lakeside project. We've been through the preliminary PUD approval for this, and nothing has changed from what was previously approved. We went back to planning and zoning for the final PUD, which was approved on June 20th. DRC on May 30th was approved as well. And the only thing that has changed is we've codified in here the Gateway Bridge feature. And then the developer has committed to funding for the gateway if the bridge does not get built of $150,000. Their goal is to build the bridge, but if it doesn't, there's funding for a new gateway there that is now officially in this for you. Everything else is the same. Glad to answer any questions you have. The applicant and the representatives are here. But again, nothing really substantial has changed.
Have a motion for approval.
Second.
Thank you. Comments, questions, Mr. Massey?
Last time we discussed this, I had a question about the naming of Lake Margaret, and indicated that historically the name of that is Fiddler's Pond. I see that in the second whereas in the ordinance, it refers to traditions on Fiddler's Pond by Lake Care, ordinance number 2012-06, adopted on April 12th. So evidently there is some indication that Fiddler's Pond is well known.
It is. On the original plat, it was Lake Margaret was the original name. The owners have done extensive research on it. At the end of the day, I'm not going to speak to the applicant, but they told me the whole doesn't matter what we call it, they're okay with either name.
Okay, the historical significance I think would be important, but thank you for looking into that.
Any other comments from Ms. Stewart?
Yes, to follow up on Mr. Massey's comment, I received an email via someone who lives down on Grandview from the lady that is in the chair of the Mount Dora Historical Association, and apparently Fiddler's Pond was the initial name back in, way back, and then it was changed to, I want to say it wasn't Lake Ethel. I don't have the email handy with me. It wasn't Lake Ethel, and then Margaret was the last of the names. And I know this is minor, but he asked me to convey to the applicant that it would be a really wonderful thing to have Waterman go back to the original, the original name and maintain the historic ambiance. So I'm just throwing that out for your kind consideration.
Tim Green Consulting Group. I'm the applicant on behalf of Waterman Communities. What was on the plan is what's on the plat. So that's what we got. That's what the surveyor researched. It actually, just for your history lesson, it was named Lake Margaret on the plat of Sunset Heights, which is still the existing plat, and that is in Plat Book 3, page 34, dated December 3rd, 1914, signed by J.P. Donnelly. So Mr. Donnelly named it Lake Margaret in 1914. Fiddler Pond is fine. It's totally owned. It doesn't, we can put plaques around it and give history on all its names. It might be a way to bring some history forward. But I can't disagree with J.P. Donnelly. I think he had something to do with this city being created.
And I understand there's several stories as to fiddlers, like
probably our stories.
Folks falling into the pond for different reasons and so forth. So I understand it's a long history.
I'm just glad as the planner for this project, that's the only question we have.
I'm just waiting it to be completed so I can move in, because it looks like it.
Just real, okay, so it says here, Fiddler's Pond was an early name shown on an 1880 Eustis map. The early name was made famous by two separate tragedies that took place there. Subsequent maps have shown the name as Lake Eloise, and the most modern ones show it as Lake Margaret, but it also sounds like Margaret was back in the day as well. So whatever you...
We probably won't have a sign in the middle
I
of this.
promised I would bring it up.
Yeah,
I did.
thank you.
I'm done.
And the thing is, in 1914, the city had been incorporated by then. In the 1800s, it wasn't, because it was 1910 when they incorporated.
It will be your toughest question.
It will be. I'm glad to answer it.
I
Thank
look at
you.
it this way, if you're gonna put a restaurant around that lake anywhere, it'll sound a lot nicer as Fiddler's Restaurant than Margaret's Restaurant. So.
Would you like home cooking?
Where's the Margaret's?
Okay, any other comments from the council? Seeing none, anybody from the public wish to, public part, right? Yeah, public, anybody from the public wish to address this item? Okay, seeing none, any other discussion from council? Oh, I need a motion from, we already did the motion, didn't we? Okay, I should have waited for that point there. And discussion, council action, so Ms. John, can we have the roll call vote, please?
Tillett?
Yes.
Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Mr. Robson?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Crail?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. Okay, final reading of ordinance number 2018-11, the Economic Development Ad Valorem Tax Abatement Agreement with For Steamroller Studios LLC. Ms. Cockcroft, could we have the title read, please?
Yes, sir. Second and final reading of ordinance number 2018-11, an ordinance of the City of Mount Dora, Florida, approving an economic development ad valorem tax exemption agreement for Baker GC Development LLC and Steamroller Studios LLC, authorizing the mayor designee to execute said agreement, providing for notification to the Lake County Property Appraiser, providing for legislative findings of intent, providing terms and conditions, providing for implementing administrative actions, providing for conflict severability, non-codification, correction of scrivener's errors, and an effective date.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. As I think I've spoke with each of you, this package has now properly been returned to you for a final reading, indicating all the required sections of the ordinance that's stated by the city's ordinance. And I believe each of the items have been addressed and clarified within the memo as well as within the attachments, and we would ask that you approve the tax abatement program, so to speak, for the steamroller company.
Anybody here from the applicant? None. Anybody here from the public wish to address this item? None. Any discussion, further discussion from council? Have a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Second. Ms. Johnson, can we have roll call vote, please?
Ms. Hope?
Yes.
Did you second it or did Mr. Massey?
I did.
Okay. Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Crail?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Robson?
Yes.
Ms. Tillett?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. Here we have a draft ordinance number 2018-12, short-term rental registration fee and inspection program. And do we need the title read for the draft or not?
We don't need to read it because I just need input from the, based on the draft, because we need to bring it back to you as a first reading ordinance and advertise properly, so forth. So, again, we believe we have, through some very detailed work from our city attorney, who actually looked at the last short-term rental program draft ordinance and stated that she felt like there was some items that could be improved upon. She went back to the Florida statute, and I think probably could answer most of your questions in reference to the data that's in here. But we believe what we presented you is at least a good first draft. We may still need to do, make some adjustments. We may still need to tweak a few things. You may still request something that we haven't thought about at this point in time, but we have established that we feel like there should be some type of initial registration of approximately $80 and then an annual re-inspection of $50 each year. I will tell you, City of Orlando, theirs was $180 for their registration, so they do have a program. We can always look at that. We have not at this point in time because Jennifer was able to provide you the current draft. She also provided you quite a bit of information. I just think, though, from a timing perspective, we do want to have this in place before our legislators begin the process early in fall. So we have this month in August. After that, I would think we need to have it in place by September, first meeting in September at least. So we do have a little bit of time, but I turn it back over to you if you have any direction or to the city attorney, either one.
Okay, so you answered my question that we're kind of on the schedule here to try to get our first reading in place and the final, so before the legislature does any action.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. And Ms. Phil, and then Mr. Russell.
Yes, I commend everybody who's worked so hard on this. I know that this is needed. There are a couple of streets that I know of now where 2 of the entire houses on the block are owner occupied, and the rest are short-term rentals. When people purchase property, especially in our downtown historic district, I think they envision, becoming part of the neighborhood. Having a bunch of short-term rentals in there is not really conducive to a neighborhood, and I feel very badly for those individuals. I also know that our B&Bs have struggled in the past few years to entice people to come in, and they have to jump through a lot of hoops and a lot of very expensive hoops in order to keep operating. I also know that the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulations, they don't have the staff to ensure that the business license, the licenses and the licensing, etc., is being done correctly, and they're losing out on revenue. And not only that, but I want to make sure that Mount Dora is safe for our short-term visitors, and so I heartily support this effort, and I think that an initial $80 application fee, and which will go towards a building inspection costs, fire department inspection, etc., and then an annual reinspection each year, especially with short-term rentals, because people who rent short-term usually don't take very good care of the property. But there are a lot of people that just don't. It's not my house. Why do I care? So good on everybody that worked on this. I've heard that.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Ms. Tillett. This is our minimum basic response to what we can do under Home Rule. The legislature took that away. You've all read the preliminary material. They preempted us from using our home rule, except in this area, so we have some flexibility. And the sooner the better. Legislative committee hearings are will be going on several months thereafter, but before the legislature starts. So we want to get in the front line to do that as much as we can. I have several style or verbiage suggestions, and rather than do it now, I could give it to our manager, and you can get it to our city attorney if that's okay with our city attorney. I don't need to waste time now. It was a wonderful job done. I'm certainly very pleased with it. It's just I have some questions on some verbiage as well.
And since you're looking at a draft, you're looking at a time you want to bring it back as a first to us. What time frame would you like council to give you any additional comments, any red lines on this thing or whatever, and give you something back? Do you have a time frame on that?
Well, unless you're going to move pretty quickly this week, it's going to be tough to meet the July 31st, but I would welcome you to, if you want to send them back by Friday, we'll try to put the first reading, because it's the second reading that we have to have the timing published, and we can meet that for the August 21st. So if you can get them to us by this Friday, we'll include it on the July 31st and get the first reading.
Okay, just submit them on in, and
okay.
We'll do that.
Just send them to me, anything to me, and then I'll send them on to Jennifer.
And if I can add, because of how close our August meetings are, if we don't do it on the 31st, we will not be able, we will not be able to meet the advertising for the end of the next month.
We would push to the September 13th if we don't.
I have no additional suggestions, rewrites, or anything, so you can cross my name off.
Okay.
Mine are minimal. I'll get it to you.
I'll defer this one.
No, I'm satisfied. Moving ahead. Mr. Tucker.
I am not satisfied. I'm gonna rock this vote because I'm not satisfied with it at all. Gwen, could you pass out the,
Yes, I can. I forgot all about them.
Thank you. I am all for a fee. I think everybody should be licensed who has a vacation rental. I don't know where this has come from, where you think you have to have an inspector. If you look at the city of Orlando that I'm giving you, this went into effect July 1st in Orlando. There's nothing about an inspection fee or an inspection. You got a copy.
Oh,
Yeah. City attorney has a copy.
okay.
I made a copy for everyone, or Missy made a copy for everyone, so.
I'm good.
Yeah, and I think the city is overstepping. You look at the it says, where it says reminder, the last sentence, we do not require inspections prior to licensing vacation rentals or timeshare projects, but we may inspect at any time upon request or complaint. I think that's absolutely fair.
I'm sorry, I don't.
Where are you reading?
On the left, this one here, the last.
This one.
For the state, that's the state application for a vacation rental, okay? There's been a great amount of comments about being licensed. This is a state license. State license doesn't say we will inspect your property. It says we may inspect your property upon complaint or request. You're going to somebody's house. Now with the city of Orlando, again, there is no mention of any sort of inspections. A rental period of less than 30 days, one booking at a time, the resident must live on site and be present when hosting guests. Proof of registration must be linked to any online advertising. All those four, I think, are fine. If you start talking about inspecting someone's home because you have a vacation rental, I think we're opening the city up to another lawsuit at some point in time. If you talk to our city attorney, I think our city attorney will caution you about inspection. Maybe if now if you want the owner of the residence to possibly sign off on a certificate that they have the proper not fire hydrant, I'm drawing a blank. Smoke alarm and anything fire extinguisher, fine. I have no problem with the owner signing off. But I think we are leaving ourselves open to issues down the road by including that second.
There's two different types of rentals then, because this one here is referring to when the resident lives on the property in the city.
Yeah, it says you must.
It
That's
must,
part of it.
whereas here we've got a lot of short-term rentals where the owners do not live in it.
Well, that's what, that's the only thing I'm telling you is that's what Orlando is doing. I'm not saying this is our guideline.
No, but what I'm saying is there are two different types.
This is,
and so
Orange County and Orlando did not allow short-term vacation rentals up until this year. And this is the guidelines they put in place.
Right, but you're not listening to what I'm saying with all respect. There are two different types. Then there's the kind that the owners live there and choose to rent out a room as a short-term rental, which I think that's what this is referring to.
Well,
and then there is, at least on the first page that you were pointing out, and then there would be the short-term rentals of homes that people have that they come in for a few days and leave. So that, to me, is two different types. And I understand what you're saying, perhaps, about the home in which they live there and they're only renting a room out, and whether or not those need to be
If you look
inspected
on
because
page
somebody's
3.
already living there, versus a house that has no one living in it and absentee owner renting it.
And we have an inspection policy for long-term rentals anyway, don't we?
We do.
That's,
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, my only caution for my colleagues here is before we do anything, I would talk to our city attorney, and I know.
Hold on a second.
I'm just waiting.
And our city attorney, they give you some warnings, but, you know, I'm only one vote, so, but
Ms. Cockcroft,
Is it
would
my
you like
turn?
to comment? Yes, please.
Okay.
Before we continue on, any more questions?
Okay, so from the beginning, I've cautioned you, you have an existing ordinance on the book for bed and breakfast. Those are short-term rentals by definition. Under your existing ordinance, which is grandfathered in against the preemption, you have the right to go in and inspect properties for life safety issues. In any other situation that doesn't follow under that bed and breakfast ordinance, you would need an inspection warrant for code enforcement to go in and check that property. The reason you get away with going inside the door is because you have that bed and breakfast ordinance in place. Now, if you decide to amend that ordinance, which is what was proposed, what we were asked to bring to you, you take the risk of losing the ability to do it under your bed and breakfast ordinance for what you have in place. Now, I agree that it's legal for you to put in place a registration. It's fine to, require fees and an annual fee and a certification and proof that they have a license, those kinds of things. But as to inspection, I have heartburn on that. It was actually discussed during the legislature when they had discussions about the preemption this past session. And the two different versions went through the legislature, as you know, one that would have given us more home rule and one that would have, made it more strict or kept it as it was, rather. So I lean more in towards of steering away from the inspections, going with the registration, maybe keeping I just worry about you losing what you have already with the bed and breakfast. And if you read through the articles that I've given you in the backup, that's the position around the state, is that city attorneys are very concerned about losing potential ordinances that they already have on the books. And the ones that have been successful are the ones that lean more towards registration and addressing noise and parking and things like that. So we could add in some lane, we could make some additions to strengthen maybe the noise and the parking regulations if you wanted to do that to help. But I think my recommendation would be to stick more towards registration and lean less against an inspection. I'll do as you direct, but that's my
Mr. Wilson and Mr. Creel.
take on it.
Thank you. Good comments, Council. I want to have us recall that when we first started talking about this and we had bed and breakfast homeowners here, talking to us about this, they did a survey and they went online, compared those that had filed for a state license and those that didn't. There were something like, I'm inventing the number, it was over 200 bed and breakfast, short-term rentals we had here, and about 20 or so had actually gotten a state license. The state doesn't have the time or the energy or the staff or whatever it is to monitor this, or they would have already sanctioned 200 some short-term rental folks for not applying for a license. I imagine there's some regulations that says that's an offense of some kind that's punishable by something for the state, or they wouldn't have it. So it's not working at the state level. Secondly, I certainly think our legal counsel, city attorney, should be checking on additional parking issues and adding that to it, and other things that you mentioned. Ms. Cockcroft, I think that's a great idea. Add that as much as we can get in here in order to provide some equality to the bed and breakfast folks that are getting essentially, I'll use my words, cheated by vacation rentals that don't comply with state law. The other question I have is maybe rhetorical, and maybe you can answer that. If we have a registration process that you're suggesting, what's the purpose of that? If we just get $80 from somebody for registration, don't we have to have some reason to charge that, as in inspecting it to see if they have fire extinguishers, things like that? Isn't there something?
It's mainly to make sure they have this and that they're meeting all the state requirements, which would, I believe, those is, the ability and effect for those things.
Okay.
And like Mr. Tucker suggested, have them sign a certification, and then we could turn it over to the state if we need to. If
All
there's
right.
complaints.
It's a good point, and I imagine, if I can
And/or
continue, Mayor,
enforcement.
I imagine that you will still have some that will still operate without us. And if our only sanction, if our only reason for having this is to get the $80, then I'm not sure. It seems to me we can go further. We should push the envelope, in my view, as much as we can, as much as we're allowed, subject to your recommendations as our city attorney, so that we can utilize our home rule charter to the extent we haven't had it taken away. And I just think if city attorneys are saying we can't do an inspection, there must be some process that maybe we can research that allows us to do something along those lines.
What are we benefiting from? What are we benefiting from? You have people get licensed. All the Airbnb should be licensed.
That's my point.
Okay,
That's our point. That's what we want to do.
But now the next step, we're just adding something onto it. We're saying, no, get licensed, but we also want an inspection. We're going to charge you for that too.
That's the money is used for, is to see if the health and safety and welfare that the legislature has allowed us to use our home rule for
On B&Bs.
can
They're different animals.
yeah. And if we're going to risk B&B being shut down, then I'm opposed to that. But
I don't want any of the B&Bs to be shut down.
I mean,
You look in our town.
Losing our enforcement.
You look in our town. Our town has approximately
12.
You got 12 B&Bs that probably have 80 rooms, 90 rooms. Okay? That's a guess on my part. Maybe it's 100, maybe it's 50, I don't know. 55? We have the hotel in town, downtown, that has approximately 80 rooms or 100 rooms. And we have the Hampton Inn that has another 50 rooms. How many vendors are here during any of the major events? Okay, 400. Okay, 300 for the arts, 400, I forget the exact number, but several hundred, not to mention guests. Mount George does not have the rooms for the people. This is another option. I don't know if any of y'all have ever stayed in an Airbnb. Okay?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, I have too. All over Europe and all over the country. I've stayed in them. I've used them. Stayed in one a week and a half ago. And I kind of raised an eyebrow when you said people that stay there don't treat them right. I said, okay, maybe they do. Yeah, and then we're not talking about the 10 college kids hitting a place in South Florida or Clearwater Beach or something. Mount George does not get the same clientele as Clearwater Beach or... We don't get 10 kids in a room in Mount George. Okay? If we do, police chief is right here. We think somebody would call. I've talked to the police chief, and he's had no complaints on alcohol, parking, noise.
We should just let them go on license then.
No, have them licensed. I disagree with you 100%, Mr. Olson. Have them licensed. Have every one of them licensed. That gives us an idea of what we're doing. Have the owners, again, sign off on an affidavit that they have whatever they are required to have.
I don't have a problem with that.
I personally don't have a problem with that. I want to make sure that we are treating our B&Bs. I don't want to give up what we have with our B&Bs unless I think perhaps, are we saying that perhaps we have a different set of rules for B&Bs than we do for the short-term vacation rentals? Okay, maybe they're slightly different species of the same animal, okay? Or genus of the same species. I would like to see that we at least know where they are and that they are paying their bed tax or, their registration fee, whatever they pay to Florida. And I would be content with that much. I think,
I guarantee you.
I'm here from Mr. Crail. It's okay.
I like what Mr. Olson said about the parking and so on, strengthen that to the extent that our city attorney thinks we can get away with it, I guess would be the way to say it. But I really like Mr. Tucker's idea of having some sort of an affidavit or a checklist so that the property owner is signing saying the smoke detectors are as they should be and in working order and whatever other health and safety things. Plus, and we talked about this when we were talking about the long-term rental home when Mr. Atkins was here, whenever that was, a year or more ago, that rather than lots of inspections, that we use, and maybe we ask have the landlords of short-term rentals, if you have a complaint, a health and safety related complaint as the renter of this home for 2 nights or whatever, please contact Chief O'Grady personally with his home phone number, night or day, something like that. But I really like that combination because that puts the property owner is saying, I have this stuff. The review of the short-term renter on but also the opportunity for to have a complaint filed.
If I could just bring it back to one thing to consider, what they have in your analysis, what they did find a lot of times with noise complaints is that they're hard to enforce because even with regular noise complaints, the chief gets, well, they come out there,
sure.
By the time you resolve it, it's resolved. And, those you go, it stops, you leave, you come back, it's, new renters, and it may take a lot of resources from the police department to.
But not if we haven't had many complaints.
Not if you haven't had any complaints, and I mean, if your clientele is different in different cities, then that may not be an issue, noise.
One question of our city attorney, if I might, Mayor. With regard to the adoption, look into registration page 3 of the.
Where are you at? I'm sorry.
Page 3 of the proposed resolution, under right about in the middle of the page, you talk about planning and development department can promulgate reasonable rules and regulations, and then down in paragraph 2, it talks about standards of review. Is it still possible that that planning and zoning department can lawfully adopt rules, and that's the place maybe that's put in, you're required to have a fire extinguisher and smoke alarms and safety issues? Can that be done there?
Building department falls under planning, and Adam can back me up on this.
Whatever department, and just whatever one you
Yes,
said.
under registration.
You want to address that?
Can we do that?
Yes, sir. I talked to our building official about it today, knowing this question might come up this evening. The only thing in the state building code is the long-term rental requirements. where for those inspections, we check for working fire extinguishers, working smoke alarms, and we make sure that the electric works and toilets flush and the water runs. We could have an owner sign an affidavit that's saying all that in lieu of the inspection. That is possible, yeah.
That may work, that may satisfy me, but we have to have some reason to charge the money, or we'd lose the case in that case. We can't just say you have to pay us $80 without doing something.
Has to represent administrative costs.
Yeah. So, I like that if under the current legislation, or our restrictions, home rule restrictions, if we can do that under rules and regulations adopted by planning and zoning folks and approved by this council, that may satisfy me.
We actually have a checklist by which the building department uses when they go out and do the inspections on the rental homes. So if you actually convert the checklist to your affidavit,
It's the same stuff.
it's the same stuff. So you could actually do it from that perspective, and that checklist has already been reviewed in the sense of approved by the building, as well as assessed a fee that would possibly work.
And we just have to wait for something bad to happen in order to do anything.
Again, I think you can actually put online, you can put in, we can create a code enforcement for, we'd have to go through the process, and that could take a little bit of time, but we can actually get to it, and anyone from the outside could actually do that, which would make that process kind of anonymous.
Does that work?
I was thinking
Just
when
keep
they,
in mind you have one code enforcement officer.
if they sign an affidavit, is there anything that would be part of the affidavit when they sign, by signing an affidavit? So like, I think you were addressing an issue there earlier about liability, about the city overstepping its bounds or whatever. So by putting the burden back, if by signing the affidavit, taking the shortcut of an affidavit, so to speak, that they're going to be assuming something in writing, that they're going to be assuming
Their
something.
liabilities are what they are to who they have on their property, and the city can't really dictate what liabilities on them. We can just impose whatever restrictions are in the city law.
Can we require them to waive any action against the city if they violate?
Getting out, okay. That's why we've got attorneys on here also, all these attorneys here to come up with these different terms.
If they violate something, they would then, by violating, waive any action against us if they try.
I just don't know that that would keep a renter from, potentially.
No.
If we create a false sense of security on part of the Airbnb renter, that then we're getting involved in the chain of liability potentially is my concern. I have to look at that.
Sure.
Something to look at.
I have a little bit of concern.
Okay, Mr. Tucker, you had a follow-up.
Yeah, just to respond to Mr. Olson. My wife and I have a business in town. Every year, I give the city $35 or $40, or forget what the fee is for us to have our business in town. So these Airbnbs, vacation rentals, are a business in town.
Mm-hmm.
They would be required to have a license.
Mm-hmm.
So, having a license, I think, is mandatory. And
I don't disagree with that.
and just as a follow-up, if and I would volunteer my services to do it. If there are 200 Airbnbs in town, but only 25 or 30 licensed, I would check that myself and send off a very nice letter to Kerry Baker saying, Kerry, you are missing 4% every month from these Airbnbs possibly. And he will send them a very nice letter.
You heard it
Fill
here,
out this form.
volunteered to do.
Yes, I had no problem volunteering to do it.
And also remembering that Airbnbs, VRBOs, we're picking Airbnb, but it's a lot,
Vacation.
short-term rentals. Short-term rentals vary from day to day to hour.
STVRs.
I haven't heard of that one.
Or short-term vacation.
STRs.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is we're all in favor of doing this, and you're gonna tweak this.
I can tweak it, but remember, logistically, it may be virtually impossible because of the fact that they do change from day to day and hour to hour. And
Can you give us your best shot?
I will.
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing is, we want you to think that what we're doing is legal and acceptable under the law, at the same time offering as much safety and protection to guests and treating all of our business owners in the rental business in a similar manner. Seems easy.
That was.
Seems easy. Yeah, it's the
Says the
easiest
guy
thing
that
I've
has to
ever
do
had
it.
to do.
And by tomorrow, oh no.
And basically, you know, I mean, shoot, Orlando is charging $275 and then $100 or $125 every year after that, depending upon whether the owner lives on site or not. And I think an $80 annual is relatively simple, and it ensures that this has to be paid annually as well, correct? The Florida business license, that's not a one-time thing.
Annually, yes. As long as you stay reasonably with your fines. Miami got in trouble by imposing like $25,000 fines and restricting advertising and things like that.
That would be confiscatory for sure.
Okay, I think we've given Ms. Goffroy quite a bit of information here to come back and for the first draft.
For when?
Because next week. No, okay.
Because I will be out of town all next week.
We'll take it with you.
To Bimini?
I'll take it with you. Yeah, yeah. Nice quiet place, right?
Mr. Culver will be here.
As soon as
We'll get it to you as soon as
Okay,
we can.
he's going to volunteer to take care of Terry Baker. He's going to volunteer to draft the
We'll split everything.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for what you can do on it. That'd be great.
Well, very well taken.
No thanks, Mr. Tucker.
That wasn't that bad.
No. Yeah, you're gonna blow it up too. No, you want something blown up? Talk to me. We'll get it blown up for you. We'll blow it up for you.
Why wasn't even included? You really didn't support it. That's what I didn't
Something
understand.
that it was, that's how it came to be as part of your B&B inspection and registration and inspection ordinance.
Can we do a separate
That's
VRBO ordinance?
Probably a can of worms we don't want to open.
Well, yeah, it's too late.
We're fine now, but
Do a little research.
why was it even there? Poking it.
Let's move on.
Okay, let's go on to city managers, her different, she's got different items, so go for it.
Okay.
Oops.
Please no. So department accomplishments for June, I'd like to just take a second and just point out certain things. Again, I try to, or at least I'm trying to do this from meeting to meeting. I think on page 327, you will see in purchasing all the RFPs that have been put out there. So I think it's important for you to see the services we're putting out to bid. Maybe even you can see the ITB out there for the CDBG and so forth. And then if you move on to, again, each one of these will have different information. Police department, you can see the number of calls. Again, leisure services, I think it's important to see the launch of the countdown to end the PRMP survey. Again, 1,346 surveys have been just encourage you to read through it, that's all. So I think the number is 1367 for the results. But either way, there's a lot of good information. Sometimes we're a little wordy, but we've tried to give you as much information as we can. We have an update from our lobbyists. As you'll notice on that same page I just referred you to, we have put our RFP out for our lobbyists, again, to go through the process and see who applies. So we'll be bringing that back to you, but Peebles and Smith did give you an update. There's a wonderful letter of appreciation from the city of Bushnell here to go off and work together with other cities, and Charles went through quite a bit of those. Be aware of this and acknowledge it, and we'll be reciprocating a similar letter when they accept our employees and actually do a very similar project in the very near future. So the other thing we have, do you have this ready, Lisa? We have a quick video that I would like to show you. So you can I think you enjoyed. I have to read this. Music owned by Warner Music Group. Has everyone seen it? Rights management. So can we? We'll show one second of it, just a few little takes, and then we'll stop it. So. Go ahead. We'll just start it for just a moment, then we'll stop it.
Acting award. Especially the first guy.
Just please notice that Renee and I do not have as much rhythm as Officer Rice does.
Yes.
Nobody has as much as him.
Rice gets the award.
I can't get audio. I'm not really sure why.
That's fine.
I can pull it up on my personal phone if you want. Oh.
So at least for our Facebook, we've now at least initiated, so maybe at least we'll have a few more hits on that one. So
I want to let you know we've had 22,000 views on this video, and since I posted it 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. About 127. Yeah, we had a lot of thumbs up. About 127 comments and 400 shares.
Okay. Mrs. Mother watched it 100 times already herself. So.
Well, seriously, if I may, Lisa deserves kudos beyond the pale for how she edited this thing. Because I can tell you, I saw a lot of what had to hit the
cutting room floor.
The cutting room floor. There was a lot. So, thank you, Lisa, for what you were able to do.
Look at those moves. The only problem with doing this video, we're gonna end up losing Ivy. Yeah, no, we're gonna end up losing Ivy to Nashville, I think. After,
Rice has got it going on.
So again, I just thought I think it shows actually it's the encouraging thing in this video. Chief, we have fire department, police department, the Citizens Academy, and our civilian all involved in this. So we did not limit like some others to only our police officers. So I thought that was a wonderful.
We're all in Texas City.
So. Thank you.
Very good, very good. Very good job.
Thank you, Cindy Blevins, too. She's the one that came up with the song because we could not agree on a song to save our lives. So Cindy Blevins with Animal Control picked the song, and it seemed to match perfectly for.
Very good. On the city manager vacation, again, I presented that to you. That does require a vote. I've requested that you allow Charles Revel to be the acting city manager while I'm out of town.
Approval.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
And then I'll hand out as we so that you can look through them before Thursday. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, board appointments, we have a Community Redevelopment Agency Advisory Committee. I think that's, Mr. Cook, was that yours?
Yes.
Okay.
Jake Gunther. I'd like to nominate him to the CRA. I'm taking Ms. Hoy's recommendations for somebody who's not only younger than us, half our age, easily. I know.
I'll second the motion if you need it.
But it's a good young man. He wants to be involved in the city. His, of course, his family, his parents, grandparents, long outdoor folk. So I'd like to give Jake a good old shot at it.
Okay, fine. And we had a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
And that's the city attorney's report. Ms. Cockcroft, anything to add?
I'll be gone all next week, so you'll have Mr. Colbert available for me.
Okay. And it's going down to all the other communications here. Miss Tillett, you get the start.
Okay, I promise I'll keep it quick. With regards to the departmental accomplishments for June and the Parks and Rec survey that came out, I'm wondering when the raw survey data can be expected to be posted online for the public. I know that you wanted to finish it up, and then I think you had to do some sort of work to kind of redact personal information.
Actually, I would prefer not to release the raw information of the online survey, mainly because the purpose online surveys, and they create themes, they bring the themes back and go through a process. after they release the report, you'll have access to the online data, but it will lead to bad conclusions or misrepresented conclusions. So that's kind of the concept of bringing all the information from different avenues.
The master plan and the outcome of that data is important, but I don't have an issue with it eventually being available, but.
Absolutely, yeah, it'll be totally full disclosure. It's just the process is that you pull in the information from all the different areas.
I understand the process. I had a question from a constituent who wanted to see the raw data, and I know that we're a city that is.
Well, at some point we'll get it.
Yeah, but, yeah.
We will. We'll make it available as soon as we can.
Okay. Okay, so, we were given a copy of the Montverde article. I know that Lake County is adopting an adapted version of said thing, and I'm hoping that we will have this on a council agenda in the very near future so that we can discuss.
Right, it has to go before DRC and then P&Z and then the council. So it's that's the required.
It's in the process to. It's incumbent upon us to ensure that we continue to, maintain the highest standards. And then,
real quick, Ms. Toll, on that, and I think the different people who are coming here, we're making them aware of these, probably the standards that are going to be coming down the road.
Yeah, and that's great. I just want to, kind of move that process along. And then again, I'd like to request that the Thursday budget workshops be live streamed on Facebook so that the public has a chance to see us in action. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Wilson.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. First of all, shameless plug for our city and our mayor and so forth. You all may be seeing the city, beautiful city, State of the City publication. I think it's the best I've ever seen. It's simple and compliments not only, of course, to the mayor, but to Ms. Hayes and Ms. McDonald for putting it together, our clerk, deputy clerks, and so forth, for the wonderful job they've done. It was impressive, and I got compliments, unsolicited compliments from residents who said, "Hey, that's really nice. That's really nice." They weren't complimenting about the picture on the front, but it was publication.
I'll get a new one.
I think our Corporal Howell and her work downtown is helping. I get feedback from folks who have said that now people are starting to park in the Presbyterian lot and so on and so forth, which is good. It's still empty, but changing that mindset takes a long time, but I think it's working. That the not only the customers, so that's good. Better education has helped. I think that would be good. Cool. Perfect. That was a wonderful presentation, and I know we all agree with that, but I just thought it should be on our website and highlighted somewhere to give her the credibility that she certainly showed us. Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Tucker.
The hour is late. Do we have a Saturday meeting?
Yeah, we're going to, it should be quick.
Yeah, sorry, nothing.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Creel.
I'll be brief as well. This discussion tonight about the bonding financing process, I know we're not all quite on the same page yet, but I think everybody understands and gets we want to do everything we can, but we have to do it. Our fiduciary responsibility is high, and we can't be taking risks with I think that in the next several weeks, as we go through, Thursday being, just a few hours, we'll be able to come up with a plan that addresses some of these important things and at the same time satisfies each of us that proper care and due diligence and all that stuff has been done. I appreciated the discussion a great deal.
Thank you. That was a nice bonding moment, wasn't it? Mr. Massey.
I can't bear it any longer.
I appreciate your comments, Mr. Grant. Thank you. This has been a painful evening.
Things I thought about that are coming up, just to remind everybody, the Center for the Arts has got a fundraiser this weekend that they're doing the mystery thing on 2 o'clock on Saturday, and they're doing another one at 6 o'clock. And then Saturday night also is Neil Diamond over in the Community Willing, the tribute show, which is supposed to be really fabulous. And then a week from Saturday is Backpack. So anybody who has some time at the pool area this year, and we're Amy and the whole team has worked very hard because this is the 10-year anniversary of doing this event with the children. The police department are very active, the library, everybody. It's a community event that is a week from Saturday. It's the 28th of July.
Thank you. Okay, live streaming for workshops will be on the agenda for the 31st for a group discussion at that point. And as far as that Backpack Day, you are going to be there for me that day because I'm going to be traveling back from New Jersey on that day. So so I will not be here for that day. No, I enjoyed this. I enjoyed that event. And, but other than that, no, there's not too much more for me to say. Tonight we did a lot, we covered a lot tonight, so thank you all for your diligence and patience and for that. And we are adjourned.